What happens when you take Rice Krispies and you put it in your bowl and you want to eat it? You got about 36 seconds before it is disgusting. It turns into an expanded, soggy mess. I want the expansion. We're going to go the magnet approach here, where I'm going to try to stay ahead of the curve. It's all about topping off.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Nathan Payton, welcome back.
Great to be back.
You just had 4 athletes in the Arnold Strongman?
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
Went very, very, very well. Yeah, anytime the guys show up and hit PRs and everything, you know, they've done all they can do at that point. And then it becomes, you see how the cards fall. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I had my guys finish 2, 3, 4, and 7. So yeah, really, really good performances by all.
Any unexpected?
Honestly, probably across the board. The main thing that I see everybody's attention drawn to is Austin Andrade. Austin was second, and I think a lot of people didn't even necessarily talking as far as even within the top 5 leading into the show. You know, they do all the predictions. But Austin is just unbelievably strong. And his training partner, Nick Guardione, the same thing. Like, they train together, and so they push. And Nick's still basically a rookie, still working his way through, and he's made unbelievable strides too. And so he was 7th. Interestingly enough, if he'd had a little bit more time and went for one more rep on the log, it would have been enough points to actually catapult him up into 4th or 5th. So he won the last event. He was 3rd on this 3rd event of the second day as well. So he really surged. Trey Mitchell hit 5 reps with the Austrian Oak, which is unprecedented. Like, typically the 4 is even like, oh my God. So no, all the guys just did incredibly well as far as.
How did Austin do last year? Because I had him and Nick both on the podcast before the event. And I remember he did better than I thought he was going to do last year. Did he win an event? There's something that's ringing in my head that I can't really place.
The stone to shoulder, he's incredibly good at. I think so that one, he's the one, you know, it's a natural stone. You got to just crush your face, break your jaw, and get it up there to the top. So, that's the event that he really, it's just natural for him for some reason. But everything that he'd be it the circus dumbbell, be it his overhead, the deadlift, he's a beast on. So all those things. And if you had to ask him what he'd probably say he was proudest of is the fact that he was able to finish the last event, which was like a running back medley loading up a ramp, you know, and he was able to finish that. And so, yeah, just across the board, all the guys did amazingly well. And of course, Martins Licis. So it was Martins' first contest back after extended time away, rehabbing. People don't really understand how severe his injuries were. I mean, I was literally backstage with him at his last contest. And I mean, he's a tough, I'll say kid because I'm 53, but he's a tough kid. And I mean, the tears were just uncontrollable. He was so much pain the last time that he competed. So to get over that mind, you know, fuck for all the back and just all the things that he had to go through to get back and ramping it up. So it's this contest, then he goes into Worlds, you know, now that he's got that. And then this contest, he probably did well enough to get into Rogue as well.
Okay.
So his 2026 should be amazing, but he finished 3rd, got on the podium. And this contest was literally testing the waters. It was, can't I? You know, how's this going to go? And every week as he progressed along, the injuries stayed quiet. You know, the rehab that he has done through these past couple of years especially has held, and he was able to hit everything he needed to hit. He was hitting PRs in training all the way up, and that building confidence that he knew he wouldn't break.
Yeah.
But still very different the day of a competition and to get that knocked out. So he really knocked it out of the park, and the fact that he was able to hit podium after that much time off is unbelievable.
Yeah. How was I'm trying to think of because last year I had several people on the podcast after competing in the event, and there were complaints about warm-up room, you know, not having, like, going to the bathroom was a pain in the ass and they didn't have water. Did they fix a lot of those things?
They really take good care of you backstage as far as the warm-up area goes. like the equipment, accessibility, having anything that they need really to truly be safely warmed up and ready to go for event. They really do a phenomenal job as far as staging that and getting that set. The bathroom situation, it is sort of what it is at the Arnold. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of individuals who got some pea-shaped hands because that's how it's going to go, because the guys have got to run to the bathroom and with the public. So they're there, setting PRs in the urinal and then heading back, passing through the sea of people to get into the.
So that's the way it's always been.
Yes.
All right. Because the complaints I was hearing from that were the athletes didn't want to look like dickheads, but they got to get to the bathroom and back.
Yep. And you're fired up. So literally, you know how it is. It's like, it never fucking fails that when you need to go to the bathroom, it's after you've just suited up, wrapped the knees, done everything. And then all of a sudden, there you go. You got to pee. And it's the same thing with strongman. It's like, it never fails right when they're like, okay, 2 minutes. That's when the urge to pee hits. And with the way that a lot of the events position the body, if you got to do any business, you better do some business or you're going to do it out there on the floor.
Yeah. Well, that brings up an interesting question just off the top of my head then how do you manage how do you manage that if you're backstage working with them, because you don't want them peeing all the time, but at the same time, you don't want them dehydrated?
That's a great question. So that really brings it up into a segue for the way that I approach everything. So I'm the exact opposite of the way that collegiate sports, NFL, the way everything has ever done anything, unfortunately. I'm old school, meaning I remember the days back when, your NFL players had to play outside in stadiums. There was no such thing as a dome, and they're out there in the heat after they've worked construction jobs all week long because the pay wasn't that. So if you were a lineman, especially O-line or D-line, you were out there working construction, pouring concrete during the week, eating hot dogs, when you could get to them, hitting the beer on a Saturday night, and then showing up and playing a game on a Sunday because you had to have two jobs. Ironically, your ability to practice, it was not in an air-conditioned bubble. It was not in an environmentally perfectly controlled situation that also had, tubs ready for ice, that had the physical therapist ready on standby, to take care of you as soon as you're done practicing or anything. No, you're out there in the sun in a stadium in, Arizona or Los Angeles or Texas. You're just out there in the heat getting hammered. The guys the hydration was an afterthought. What were they doing back then? As well as I do, salt tablet.
Yeah, well, I remember when I played high school football, it was like a water pipe.
Yep.
And you had 15-minute breaks every couple hours.
Absolutely.
Maybe if you screwed up, you weren't getting the break.
100%. And so I treat everybody, and I'll tease the guys, that I treat them like they're a female who's really stressing out because she's got an important photo shoot coming up and she's worried about water retention. And she wants to get rid of it. I said, so we do the opposite. We're going to do exactly what she wouldn't do in order to prepare for her photo shoot as a supermodel. We're going to retain as much fluid as we can. And so that's how I approach it with the guys, where what I'll feed them and how I'll set them up going into the events, knowing that, we can't really be peeing nonstop the whole damn day, or they won't be able to, it'll interrupt their warm-ups. It'll interrupt, like you said, it'll be inopportune timing when they need to go out and compete. So I approach them nutritionally in a manner to encourage them to retain fluid. So, 20, 25 years ago, whenever it was, I started with the whole Rice Krispie treat thing when those things first started coming out and being prepackaged and mom didn't have to make them for you. I started using those with all the athletes. And so people would see like Brian Shaw on like World's Strongest Man, sitting there eating Rice Krispie treats. Brian would talk about it to people. And I, honest to God, came up with it from Travis Ortmeyer, who you've had on. So Travis, again, this is that environment NFL type of tie-in. He trained at this place called the Unit down there in Texas, and it was literally a storage unit in the sun, no shade, no anything. They literally had to pull all the whatever you wanted to do that day, be it stones, log, whatever the case may be, yoke. You had to first pull everything out of there to get at the thing you wanted, which would inevitably be in the very back of it. Pull all that stuff out. You're spending an hour trying to do that just to get at the thing you need to do in order to train. And it's 110 degrees in Texas on the blacktop. So with that, I started using the Rice Krispie treats on Travis because I'm like, man, basically we have to get ahead of this game because, as you know from powerlifting as well, how do you cut weight when you need to make weight? Drink a bunch of water, right?
Yeah.
3 gallon, 2 gallon, 1 gallon, testo. So it's kind of you're running behind the curve once you start super hydrating at the point where, okay, now I need to perform. Let's get those fluids going. You're actually telling your body, pull it out, pull it out, pull it out, because you're inundating it with so much fluid at a time. And obviously where water goes, electrolytes go, and then everything goes to hell. So I went the other way. I went, here's what we're going to do. We're going to basically situate yourselves to where you're going to retain fluid. So carbs hold fluid. The tricky part is if you combine your hydration and your carbohydrate needs at the same time, that's when stuff kind of goes cattywampus. It's not all that efficient because you're still keeping those same triggers in place of water in, water out. The kidneys are going to sense. So if you can have a large carb load, if you will, but minimal, because these guys are doing things that your stomach can't be sitting there with a big belly full of food. Mm-hmm. So those little tiny Rice Krispie treat squares, it's a dry starch-based carbohydrate.
So simple carbohydrate, no fats.
And it's dry. Yeah. So what happens when you take Rice Krispies and you put it in your bowl and you want to eat it? You got about 36 seconds to eat that before it is disgusting, because then it turns into an expanded, soggy mess. Well, I want the expansion, because expansion means that dry carbohydrate is taking in some of the fluids that they've got circulating and is able to hold on to it. Because for about every 1 gram of carbohydrate you ingest, you'll hold about 4 grams of fluid with it, like a magnet. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, we're going to go the magnet approach here, where I'm going to try to stay ahead of the curve to where from that point on, and I use this with everything kind of that I do with my athletes, it's all about topping off. I believe big on not addressing the problem as it's occurring, but setting yourself up to mitigate that problem before you get there, so that you can just do preventative maintenance from that point on.
Now, does the sodium have to go up with that to transport the glycogen into the muscle?
Mm-hmm. Well, twofold. So the glycogen could get in via insulin, as we all know, storage hormone of the body. Glycogen getting in through the pump, through contractions. So muscular contractions can bypass the insulin system and can, by nature, just like a pump, just like if you were wringing a sponge underneath of water, squeezing it or letting it out, squeezing it, letting it out, it's going to hold or release based on like a contraction. And so you can do the sodium that way, and then you can also take the carbohydrate, being that dry Rice Krispie, in order to soak it up and then utilize it that way. Sodium being that other pump channel. So sodium can also help transport glycogen into the muscle cells as well. Again, partially through to the influence of it's on water. So because you're doing that, you're able to attack it from different angles, 2 or 3 angles if you look at it like that, to encourage the body to go into camel mode, for lack of a better term. Retain water, retain maximum glycogen and fluid in the muscle cells, and also circulating water levels. A lot of times there'll be an imbalance where guys they'll hydrate, but at the same time, especially when you combine that fluid as your main emphasis for your hydration needs, take a very certain, very popular liquid sports drink that's been around forever and often has big tubs, as seen on NFL sidelines. But when you have that, it just becomes very inefficient, because the way that you're turning your body into kind of like a fire hose. There's so much coming in at once, the body can't possibly absorb it, and you're not having that efficiency. So you're wanting it to go in and cling as much as possible into those muscle cells to keep those muscles able to contract further. Because as it's pulling in all those things, it's also pulling in electrolytes too. But sodium is kind of the big daddy go all, like Stan. Stan's all about sodium. He's 1,000% right. Sodium plays such a key role in being able to enhance the body's tolerance for shit. Because let's face it, if you're going to do strongman, if you're going to do powerlifting, if you're going to do NFL, you're telling your body, we're about to go to war. This is going to be a very unpleasant experience, but we're going to basically pad you and hold you for as long as you can in that environment. Whereas if you combine that very popular sports beverage, and that is your source of carbohydrates, that is your source of electrolytes, and that is your source of fluid, you're telling your body just go into hyper dump mode. It is going to dump rather than pull into those muscle cells. I don't know anyone who has ever consumed said beverage and then tried to, I don't care if it's squat or if it's do a deadlift or if it's the NFL. I work with NFL guys. If it's run around just doing warm-ups before a game, they're very aware of feeling that sloshing around in their stomach, like a fishbowl. If your fluid is sloshing around in your stomach, where it is not, and where those carbs are also not, is in your working muscles. It's not being pulled in efficiently. You've got all that extra for just no reason whatsoever. It's just not efficient. And that's where the Rice Krispies came into play, because they're very, very small. There's your magnet. There's your pull. You don't feel in any way bloated. You don't feel in any way disgusting. And it doesn't interfere with your leverages. So when you're trying to drop down into your squat or you're trying to set up into your deadlifts, you don't have this sudden distension that is interfering with your ability to truly lock in and get loaded up. So it basically achieved and checked all the boxes for what I was trying to do. And from that point on, the guys can just stay ahead of it from that point.
So when it's a long day like these guys have, is there any main meal that's going to fall in there at any point? Because I'll look at the power lifters and it's not as long of a day. I guess it could be, but most of the time it's not as long. Say it's 4 hours or whatever. They can kind of get away without having any main meal. But if this is going to be an 8-hour day.
So with that, I've got one guy who's an exception, because, you're always going to have that outlier guy who their body just is doing its own thing. And once you identify it, it's a bad coach who tries to make somebody conform to their way. I feel it's a good coach who recognizes my way won't work in this moment. So I'm going to adapt and use my principles, but I'm going to adapt and turn them into a different way here. And that'd be Trey Mitchell. Trey, who was just awesome as well. Same thing at this Arnold, where he also managed to finish the ramp load race, loading that last bag over. And it was a huge testimony to him, along with those 5 logs he got. But with Trey, he has to eat during a contest. He's the only guy I really have who truly has to have a meal during the contest. Now, if it's 2 cups of rice and some ground beef, something like that, I might have him do half of a serving in between, if you will. So it ends up being 1 cup and about 4 ounces of rice, which for a 365-pound guy, that's a pretty small serving of food. So it's kind of like an exaggerated Rice Krispie treat, if you will. But with Trey, it has to be, because he clears so much. That kid, if you've ever seen Trey, if he ever decided to do bodybuilding, it would be ridiculous, because he has a V taper. I mean, he is so small at the waist. It is ridiculous the way he comes in at the hips. And his back is mammoth. Looks like an aircraft carrier. He's so broad. He genetically, his mom and dad gifted him in ways that are just beyond belief, because he can clear food, both from a digestive standpoint and from a glucose standpoint, because I'm always checking my guys backstage. So I've always got my glucometers, so I can see who's coming and going, so to speak, constantly. And with Trey, if he doesn't eat, it's that preemptive approach that basically encompasses everything that I do. If I didn't do that with Trey, I could not stay on top of him. His clearance level is unbelievable. And his insulin sensitivity, Trey has so much muscle, and that also, of course, governs and influences your insulin sensitivity as well. But Trey, just his hormone situation, what he was blessed with his parents, because he's been like this since I've known him so many years now. But even when he was a youngster, playing high school, he's just been like this. His dad, I would talk with him, and the kid would play a football game on Friday night in the heat in Texas, in Lumberton, Texas. And then he would go home and he would do his chores on the farm, for 2 or 3 hours. So while every other kid is going home and beached out, dying, Trey's going home and starting his chores. His day started after the football game, so his parents have blessed him in so many ways to set him up to be successful and to be the absolute unit that he is. It's just weird, because I get to watch how his body just runs differently than everybody else. So he has to have the meal. All my other guys, and it doesn't matter if it's, 6'9", 430, 40-pound Tom Stoltman, we're not eating during contests. With them, and it's a rule that seems to go about 90% of the time, their cortisol response is so extreme after a lot of these events that their glucose levels just stay elevated. So like my guys, I won't even give them like a recovery thing after they've done an event until about 30 to 40 minutes later, because I've got to let that cortisol calm down. A lot of people would think that when they do an event, that if you check their blood sugar level, that, I bet it's low because they just went out there and they did this or they did that. Most of the time, it's always an outlier. Most of the time is the opposite, is be very high. So like, again, this past weekend here at the Arnold, so Martins Lisi's, they had to carry these stones and then do a sled drag all the way back with the stones that they just loaded on there. And only like 3 or 4 guys were able to finish. It was just absolutely brutal. And Martins, with about like seemingly half a second left, managed to finish it and get done. And it absolutely wiped him out. So, I mean, he needed needed people to basically help walk him off of the field, so to speak.
I built Elite FTS in 1998, 27 years ago, with the aim to help educate as many people as I could in strength and conditioning. And the way to do that was to keep all the content complementary. The way that we've been able to do that since day one is by providing the best products possible to help your training program. If you can put the item in a gym bag or load plates on it, we have it, and it will work. Everything from SS yoke bars to American press bars, bands. We also have a strength equipment specialist staff that helps outfit home gyms, sport training centers, colleges that have over 3 decades of experience and also have spent a lot of time working as coaches, so they understand the flow of the weight room and how things actually get done. If you're serious about your training and you want to up your game and support the podcast and all the content that we provide, head over to elitefts.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout to receive 10% off your orders.
And it's funny. So medical had to take a look. Medical always takes a look to make sure the guys are always fine. And he checked. And so I went ahead and checked his glucose levels, because they were like, I wonder if his blood sugar levels are going to be okay. I'm like, his blood sugar levels are going to be fine. And they're like, but I don't know. He just did that. And usually they give me the spiel about whatever the typical medical spiel is. I'm like, okay, but you understand this is different. This whole world is different. And so right in front of him, I checked his blood glucose level and showed the doctor, he's 143. He was 148 when he went out there. So he did that extreme event, utilized everything that I put in his system before he went out there. But I bank on that cortisol response, because I know that cortisol response, fight or flight, is going to interfere with that insulin being sucked in all the way. So I've always got to have that surplus, because some is going to get in and some is not because of that cortisol interference. And so with that, his blood sugar levels are still 143. He's perfectly fine. But it was a living example, though, of cortisol impact from extreme stress in action, basically.
So in general, what are you trying to do with the guys with their blood sugar during the competition, exceptions aside? Are you trying to have it wave, or are you just trying to keep it stable?
So we start the day and I find out wherever our baseline is.
Yeah.
So I need to know where each guy is going into it. And when you have a multi-day contest, I can see the impacts of the contest.
Well, when you say baseline, let's back up a second. When you say baseline, is it right when they wake up or after they have breakfast?
Usually both.
Okay.
So right when they wake up, we'll get a fasted. And then also once they actually have breakfast and arrive at the arena and haven't done anything or just kind of in sloth mode still.
Yeah.
I check them again and we see where we are. And everybody across the board basically was the same levels. So they all will sit like 95 to 105, like all of them. Because their diets are similar in the sense that the foods that I utilize choice-wise, but then at the same time, each guy is an individual, and so their amounts are different, and their combinations are different, because some of the guys vegetables will kind of really screw up the way that they can absorb carbohydrates. And in these situations when I'm trying to peak someone for a contest, I don't need anything getting in the way. So vegetables are just like a nice, polite afterthought once I'm trying to peak somebody for a contest, not for a daily health diet, of course. So once we establish that baseline, then I know that, okay, they're level. I can also tell and see, like, knowing that they're that way. Let's say that the second day on a 2-day contest, if it's Worlds, Worlds is 4 days. So on a 2-day contest like the Arnold, if day 1, I know that I was 95 to 105, and day 2, the guy's baseline before we get going again, let's say it slides up, he's like 115 to 120 or something, then that shows me how high his cortisol is and like how much the day before beat him up. Luckily, with this particular contest, the guys showed up on day 2 and they were running. In fact, Trey, I even predicted his. I was like, here's Trey, let's see if you're 96 today because you were 97 yesterday. And I was just throwing a number out that would be similar to what I saw that he had. And he was 96.
Yeah.
So it's when I see that, I know, okay, we're going to have a pretty good day because the guys don't have any reason to not respond to the game plan that I have for them as we're going to go from event to event. Now, when I do get a guy who shows up like day 3 of World's Strongest Man, and they're starting to get pretty beat up because it's just cumulative stress, and usually it's day 3 of them not having slept very well either because they're in the wrong beds with the wrong pillows and away from home. So then I know, okay, so I have to plan for that. Like, okay, he's already not necessarily going to respond the way I would prefer for him to with the plan that I have. So I got to kind of circumvent that. It's kind of like being a snake having to weave around stuff. So that's basically when we got our baseline, we're good to go. So I know then when I have that, I can detect if something abnormal is going on. So that then gives me the information to, if we do an event, it might be 2 events later. But if we do an event and then I check them after that event and we're below the baseline, okay, now I know that the body is really starting to, come alive. It's being very responsive because even though they're doing things that are walloping their system and encouraging cortisol release, their body is, the contractions, the muscle contractions are such, so especially if it's like a max rep event, with anything like, max reps on deadlift or max reps on squats or anything that stuff, anything that's going to pull a big pumping action with a big muscle group, then I know that I've got that as an ally that I can count on, that even if cortisol is interfering with the actions of insulin, I can bypass that by depending on the impact from the event that they're doing for the contractions. If it's, like I said, if it's a high rep event, I can use that to circumvent and get around that kind of a stop sign of the cortisol when it comes to the insulin, trying to blunt that sensitivity. So, or I can also use salt, depending on where the guys are. You got to always kind of keep an eye on the blood pressure, because that's the tricky thing about salt, is that it's extremely useful when I want to use it to manipulate insulin, when I have to counteract the fact that the sensitivity is not going to be quite high because cortisol or something. But the tricky part is, you do still have to account for it. It is going to hold fluid, which is great. It is going to be a transport, which is great. But if you're going to really stress the system with an event, let's say, and it could be powerlifting, it could be strongman, but let's just say it's going to be deadlift. A max deadlift, you can't have the body already, it's like a Ferrari. You can't have the body already near and red line, and you haven't even started the race yet. That shit scatters parts. We can't have that. So that's the tricky part of that, is trying to mitigate and balance, like, how much is going to be too much here? How much is not going to be too much here? So that's when, again, the blood sugar will show, because if the blood sugar is staying nice and controlled, that's showing me that the inflammation in the body is not sky high. Again, cortisol. It's not interfering. Now, if blood sugar really starts to get high, then that is showing inflammation, and you'll feel the inflammation. Everybody has felt that before, when you've just sky high from inflammation, either from an injury or from, if you've ever, some folks who have had vaccines and the vaccines reacted poorly, it could be even a flu shot, but you feel that tightness. That's inflammation. That's the flu shot doing what it's trained to do, which is provoke the body. Oh, it provoked it all right.
Yeah.
That's why you kind of feel like you're going to pop. It's inflammation. That's that trigger. You don't want to be at a point of max inflammation when you go out there to do a max weight lift, like a deadlift or a squat or something like that, because there's no governor, or, or I guess technically you've put on a governor, because the body is going to say, the second it detects pure red line danger,
it shuts down.
It'll shut it down.
Yeah. Well, it has to.
Yeah. Because there's only one other way. If it doesn't shut it down,
yeah,
it gets shut down the other way. So that's where salt gets a little tricky, is trying to balance that and having to understand, like, do I use that here, or do I go ahead and let the event and the contractions of the event? But when it's a one max rep event, or if you're squatting and you're going out there for, lift 3 and it's a world record attempt, it's just one. There's no pump that's going to happen other than maybe out of the hole. I've seen guys who generated a massive amount of torque out of the hole. It doesn't mean, though, that it's going to be enough that it creates a full contraction that actually can clear enough out of the bloodstream. It usually needs reps to do that.
So you got to watch the blood pressure and the insulin, glucose. And if you're watching those two, do you need to then watch the heart rate as well?
Yes.
I'm thinking after event, because you want the heart rate. The well-conditioned athlete is going to return quicker. It should. I mean, that's kind of what you train it for.
And sometimes, though, and Nick Guardione, again, it's great that we just had this contest, because I get to go through here's what I experienced here and here's how we got around that. So Nick Guardione, his adrenaline got stuck. So, and I'm sure you've been in that mode too, where you'll do you'll go out for let's say your first squat, and that you're basically just going balls out because you've been here, done that, and you have no interest in going in there and punching the clock, just getting on the board. You could care less about that. You're like, I'm here to set a record, or I'm here to win, and I'm just going big and I'm out. Sometimes when you do that, the adrenaline gets stuck. Now, it's part kudos that your body has been so conditioned through your training program, through the blocks that you've gone through, that you can engage that response to where your adrenaline is so strong that you're stuck in that super mom mode. You see those stories on where the mom picks a car up off the toddler or whatever, goes into superwoman mode. If you're able to engage that stuck mode with adrenaline, and it wasn't just a one-off, man, good things are on the way, but you've got to be able to harness that, because the central nervous system will only tolerate that for so long, and it starts to short circuit. And so with Nick, he did his event, and when he came back, about 5 minutes later, because again, they all know we're not eating anything, we're not doing anything until some time passes so I can gauge where we're at with the cortisol response. And then Nick was his hands, and he was like, I feel fine, but God damn it, I can't stop shaking, and I'm sweating. And I'm like, oh, your adrenaline is stuck. Your body wants you to get back out there and do some more. It doesn't know that it's okay to disengage right now. When that central nervous system gets like that, it's interesting, because Nick's like, will you check my sugar? All the guys are used to be doing that. So I do. And of course his blood sugar's fine because cortisol is surging. That's why. So they call it fight or flight, because when your body gets in those situations, if you had to run from a tiger. So if you walked out your door, Dave, and there was a tiger out there, and you're like, oh fuck, I better run. And you started running. Maybe you skipped breakfast. Maybe you didn't have dinner last night either, because maybe your stomach was upset. Guess whose ass could run 3 or 4 or 5 miles if they had to suddenly, even though science-wise, you shouldn't really be able to do that. You didn't have any fuel in you to operate on, and how are you doing? Your adrenaline's stuck. And that's why when that moment is over, then you get that after the effect, and then the shaking and stuff, because then the body realizes, kind of like shock, because then the body realizes, oh shit, what it just went through. So that was the situation with Nick. So that adrenaline was just stuck on him. And when that happens, 2 things: you got to let it pass, and then you got to kind of come at it, fight fire with fire. And so with Nick, if you have a teenager, when I went to school too as well, so if a child was hyper, they'd get, back in the day, I don't know if it's still as common practice, but Ritalin. Ritalin is speed. So you fight fire with fire. So if somebody is overly active and engaged and energetic, you give them speed, it tends to have, not literally speed, folks. I don't literally mean speed. But you give them something that is of an adrenaline source, obviously a speedier item, fight fire with fire, and the body has the opposite effect. It calms it down. And so with Nick, when he started doing that, I was like, all right, I do not use the sugary things for carbohydrates, but in that situation, it was a little bit different. So with Nick, I was like, what's your favorite soda again? Nick loves soda. So whenever he has a cheat meal, there's always going to be soda. He goes, Pepsi. I was like, all right. So I ran out to the vending machine and navigated the 10 million people at the Columbus to go get a Pepsi for him. And so I'm using the caffeine and I'm using the sugar, and the shock of the cold, because it's very ice cold, to basically hammer his system. So I'm fighting fire with fire, and within about 5 minutes, he was calm. He's like, oh my God, I feel so much better. I've had to deal with Evan Singleton too once. The same thing. He was completely stuck. And with him, I used the opposite. I went the aspartame, like I've got here. I went the aspartame route, because aspartame is a neurotransmitter stimulator. And he was in the same thing. He was completely stuck. And I gave him that as an aspartame, which, again, some caffeine as well. And it also, within about 5 or 10 minutes, plus being ice cold, calmed that response down.
So it's low dose caffeine, right? Because I can see people saying they want to slam a monster.
No.
Like that, which
Yeah.
is going to be too much. Where
Right.
What's interesting as I'm listening to you speak here is I would hear other coaches say that the way to navigate that would be through breathing exercises, not fight fire with fire, fight fire with the opposite.
Tranquility,
right? Where that's in situations that are competitive, I see that as like a very dicey risk, right? Because you can try to get them in a meditative state, but if their brain is still...
Wake that CNS back up to go fight again, body doesn't want to do that. I'm trying to keep them in the warrior mode, but just not as, jacked up at that point. Because you're right. Like if the body, once you, it's no different than waiting too long between attempts, right? So let's say you have your big ass squat between 2 and you're going for your world record squat at 3, and you get the gift of a 40-minute wait. Good luck. Good luck getting your nervous system. Even if 2 felt like it was nothing, and that's why you're all excited and you're like, loaded up, I'm going for the record on the 3rd. Good luck after 40 minutes getting your nervous system to be where you need it to be. In that instance, I mean, you can. Those are some other tricks. But yeah, it's a kind of an exact example of that, of too long of time between, except you're creating a fake environment of too long in between. Even if it's 10 minutes, if you zone and do the breathing thing.
What if it's a couple hours between?
That is a problem, and this problem is accurate. That is a problem that defines World's Strongest Man. It's nothing on their part. It's just the nature of the sport. It's how that works, because it's a TV show, and we're out there and we're filming, usually 2 events a day. It's a little bit different nowadays. It used to be where the damn thing took almost 10 days, and you do like an event or 2 and then sit around, and then maybe the next day you go again. So that is difficult getting, and with Tom, even he responds well. So Tom Stoltman, he'll take naps. So we'll shoot an event, he'll scorch it, and then he'll come and he'll take a nap like until it's time to go. In about 10 minutes before he needs to start warming up, kind of like a bear coming out of the cave, he'll kind of hibernate. But Tom is again, everybody's unique in their own way, and Tom is exceptional at being able to throw a switch when he needs to throw a switch, just like Brian. Like Shaw, whenever it's time to go, it's time to go. 33 seconds later, you got the most gentle teddy bear hugging every kid, taking time out, even if he just ripped his bicep off or something, like which happened in an Arnold. He's signing every audit just as nice as could be. But boy, he can throw a switch and be ferocious when he needs to be. And Tom's that same way. He can kind of climb out of his slumber and then do whatever he needs to do and then calm it back down.
Do you think that's a trainable skill?
I think it is trainable, and I think it is also genetics. Like, I'm one of those people who I will give a lot of credit to genetics, because they're just some things that you train it all you may, you cannot overcome. I can train to be an NBA player all I want. It's never going to happen. I'm 5'8", and I have no coordination whatsoever. But I think there are some things that are just genetically on standby for some people. I think some people can just tap into what they've been given as a gift. Now, does everybody have the ability to fully exploit those gifts that they have? That's where your coach comes in. That's where your nutritionist comes in. That's those roles. You're trying to get all you can out of those genetic gifts.
I can see where, everything's still going to be genetic. I can see where the genetic predisposition to get to that aroused state is one thing, but bringing it back down from that state, I think that would be more trainable, because it's obvious, right? We see it with more advanced strength athletes.
Sure.
They realize I can't stay in this mode
Right.
for 3 hours or I'm cooked. You just can't do it. And they can just boom, boom. It's just right down and they're taking it now. Like, what the hell? And then bring it right back up again, where I don't know if they train that as much as they should.
He was a great example of that. And then individuals can even watch him like in his performance. So Evan Singleton, so we won Strongest Man on Earth this year. And Evan is another like just giant teddy bear, but can throw a switch and be absolutely ferocious. But he had to learn through experience that you can't be ferocious 24/7 with the lifts. Like in between each lift, in between each whatever the event might be, you have got to be able to shut it off, temper it. There has to be a response that happens, because he would just stay lit. And then the problem is, just like you said, is it's not sustainable. And so that it ends up costing you when you actually need the energy. You don't need the energy sitting around backstage being pissed off, angry, and ready to kill everybody. You need it when you're out there.
Now with him, Les, can you just after the event just dump him full of as much sugar as possible and make him crash?
That is exactly what I do. That is ridiculous. You picked it. It's exactly what I do. And there is an interview that he does where somebody asks him, like, what did Nathan do backstage that you think helped you win Strongest Man on Earth this year? And he goes, he's basically like, that fucker kept shoving honey buns in my mouth every time I fucking turned around. And that's exactly what I was doing. A fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
I had to identify for that individual, just like the ones that are stuck with the adrenaline, like Nick was. I had to identify with that individual what the deal was. And yeah, I treated him like I would treat, my mom if she was at like Thanksgiving dinner and I wanted her to be quiet so I could actually watch football. Well, I'm going to try to sugar dump her so that she gets that feeling of, I sure could use a nap.
Yeah.
It's that. I literally was shoving tons of honey buns in him and that extreme sugar rush, because he's very carb sensitive. So it's not like it was going to mess him up in that regard for the events, but it literally calmed him down. So it's funny. You picked exactly what I did.
Well, when I spoke to you last time, it's my biggest takeaway from sitting down with you was it's all specific and very individual. It's all very individual to the person. Right. And so I walked away with like, oh, what the fuck? Everybody knows that. Right. But these are like specific examples that are kind of demonstrating that. And so it ties all that other stuff together and it shows, because people will be quick to replicate. So they'll see him eating all the honey buns. It's like, look, he said, I need to eat honey buns too. And then boom, that's the opposite effect. They can't even get themselves up.
Exactly.
Yes, because of that. How long you've been working with Austin and Nick?
So with Nick was interesting. So I first met Nick at a meeting when he was an amateur. I'd done a seminar for Strongman Corporation, as I'd done for like about 10 years in a row or whatever. And I met him there, and he was going for, a pro card. He was in that contest, and I'd met him and we had talked. And then I met him again the following year, and same thing. And when we talked the first time, I gave him some tips, and he came up to me afterwards on the second day of the contest. And he was like, hey, I did that stuff that you were talking about during the seminar. He goes, man, it was complete. I didn't trust you. he goes, I didn't trust you because I don't trust anybody. He goes, but I did it because I just didn't have anything to lose. And I figured, why the fuck not? And he goes, it was perfect. And it was what you and I had talked about the last time, where you had ended up, I talked about don't over dilute the electrolytes. And you had the experience where you had the cramp on and bump, and you used that, and it went away. He had a chronic situation where he was constantly drinking fluid backstage. And during my seminar, I do it like a contest peak seminar. So it's like, now that you're all here, here's what I would recommend.
I want to talk about sodium for a second. The research shows that optimum sodium levels are about 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended levels. That's where Element comes in. For the past 2 years, I have used Element packs in a multitude of different ways. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugars, there's no fillers, it's just what your body needs. And it's used by the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, Navy SEALs, professional sports teams. You'll hear how many people swear by how much Element has made a difference in their ability to not crash, to fight fatigue and cramps, to maintain optimal fluid balance, improve mental focus, help regulate stress, and support deeper sleep. They also just dropped the 12-ounce sparkling can, which is great. It's got 500 milligrams of sodium. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk and you'll receive a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience, but if you do, they'll make it right immediately, no questions asked. I want to talk about sodium for a second. The research shows that optimum sodium levels are about 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended levels. That's where Element comes in. For the past 2 years, I have used Element packs in a multitude of different ways. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugars, there's no fillers, it's just what your body needs. And it's used by the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, Navy SEALs, professional sports teams. You'll hear how many people swear by how much Element has made a difference in their ability to not crash, to fight fatigue and cramps, to maintain optimal fluid balance, improve mental focus, help regulate stress, and support deeper sleep. They also just dropped the 12-ounce sparkling can, which is great. It's got 500 milligrams of sodium. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk and you'll receive a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience, but if you do, they'll make it right immediately, no questions asked.
I really recommend not doing this based on all the things I've seen, and I would really recommend considering doing this. And everybody's always a little sideways with the whole, like, not sitting around drinking just tons of fluid and the supplement, not the supplement, but the very popular sports beverage. And he was like, so I just went, what the fuck? He goes, so I drastically, he goes, I never felt so good in my life. He goes, I felt so strong out there. I was like, yeah, man, because you weren't diluting and watering down your electrolytes, meaning you weren't diluting and basically covering your body's ability to facilitate contractions. You know, I mean, contractions at the end of the day, it's not just us picking up our arms or picking up our legs or assuming a squat position. It's about all those signals firing off. And if you have an imbalance or an inadequate amount of electrolytes, those are the signals that the muscles use in order to do those contractions, especially max contractions. And so he had just basically been working against himself. And so he went ahead and did that. And so he gave me that feedback. And then the next time that I saw him again, same thing. He asked me a few more things. And I went ahead and helped him. And basically, I just went ahead and started working with him right then and there. And he won his pro card at that Arnold. So, and then that qualified him for the Arnold Pro Show automatically if you're an amateur and you win that. And then he ended up getting in every pro show imaginable from that point on. He did them all. Like, he did no actual true off-season training. All he did was train for different show to different after he won his rookie year. And so that's kind of a prime example on that. But with Nick, it's like all these guys, like when you identify, like I talked about how kind of identifying cues and stuff on that, you still have to have their belief and you have to have their tie-in. And I will be the first to say I'm at an extreme advantage because they will listen to me because of all the titles that have been won and the podiums and stuff. So everybody that they look up to, you know, the odds are that they have worked with me and they've watched them, even some of them as kids, like when they reference Brian, you know, they saw Brian even when they were younger, you know, teenagers, and aspired to do that. And so they're like, well, I don't really understand. And it seems to be exact opposite of everything that I see and read on the internet. But he did win all that and he did help all those guys. So I guess I'll try it because that means they did it. Yeah, that's what they did, you know. And
so, I actually
had a question. If you're coming off of a weight cut, do you need to change your water intake? Because it sounds like you were saying that if you're drinking too much, you're like flushing out everything. I recently lost 20 pounds and now I'm done with it. So I'm trying to figure out water intake. I'm getting a lot more food now.
Mhm.
So like, should you change your water intake if you're maintaining weight and trying to get more food in your body?
It's the same where you want to throw the switch and get ahead of the curve. And so you want to encourage that fluid retention. So now you're that teenage girl getting ready to go get her glamour shots done for her senior pictures. And so you want to do the opposite of her. You want to encourage maximum fluid retention. And it's as simple as just going about your normal daily fluid intake. Did you do an IV post weigh-in?
Not an IV, but I did actually just get some blood work done. We're still waiting on that to come back. So we'll probably see more on that, but I'm drinking 128 ounces of water a day. I've done that for 20 weeks. So
what color is your urine?
It's crystal clear.
You're in good shape.
Okay.
So again, I'm old school, Dave. So it's the same thing. Like if you're, we have the best laid plans and we know what the right answer is. Drink more water, just like you said, well, I did this, so I need to drink more fluids because I've just severely dehydrated myself. And you're exactly correct. But then watch your gas tank on your car. You're the car. So when your gas tank is clear, that's your urine, that's full. You're on F. So you're full. Your gas tank is not empty anymore. Now, if your gas tank was still like 3/4 or halfway, and your urine was still discolored or darker and things like that, then yes, your hydration is still behind. But to your point, rather than just focusing on drinking the more liquids, it's switch the gear and go into the retaining more liquids within reason. The body doesn't like to be forced rapidly into anything. So it just can be as simple as starting by, lightly salting to taste your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. That way you're encouraging an environment over an extended period of time, 2-3 hours, and then it's another meal, et cetera, to have those on hand, which will encourage the body to retain fluid. Dry starches, if you can, as a kind of as a priority versus say, because rice is great. We use rice for all the meals. It's dieting staple, has been for 40 years. It's what every bodybuilder under the sun did. That's where it all kind of came out from. But you want dry because, again, you're encouraging things that will suck up and stick in the body. The rice has already been sucked up with the water. So still have it if that's part of your diet, but include some dry-based starches, even if it's just Rice Krispie, dry Rice Krispies or things like that. But those carbohydrates that you ingest will do a much better job at helping to retain fluid and keeping you on the up, on that normalcy, but without getting too carried away. Sometimes the bodybuilders have that problem where they hit that rebound, and they'll throw 40 pounds on in 2 days. Well, guess what? The body no more it likes that feeling than it did the dehydrated feeling. It's two extremes. So you want to just get back into the groove. But just salt. A thing that I like to do too with the guys coming out of something like that is take the Morton's light salt. I wish they'd call it something else. Morton's light salt is nothing more than powdered electrolytes. If you read the ingredients on the back, it's just potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium. There's nothing else in it. If they would brand it, name it something else, it'd be a lot more clear what it is. It's the potassium that's giving it kind of that, and then that little bit of sodium is where the flavor is coming from in that combination. But you can use that and on your meals and then a little bit of extra sodium, and that way you can tell that all your electrolytes will still be in order. You're not shortchanging one over the other or just heavily salt loading. But that's just a real easy way of getting back into it. And the body likes gentle, especially coming off of a traumatic event such as that.
One way I go about that same type of thing is I'll use the element packs, but I won't use the whole pack. So say if my oatmeal at breakfast, it'll be like half a chocolate pack because it's got the sodium, potassium, magnesium that's in there. Then potatoes at night, they have all these different flavors. So I can flavor it up however it is. And it's not too much, because if it's too much, then you can see it. It's you got D-ball face or
exactly.
I try to avoid it at all costs now. And if it's too little, then the urine, starts to go that other direction. Getting back to Nick, because as you were speaking, I do remember when they were out here, you were working with him before Austin.
Yes.
And then, so Austin's only been maybe a year or so,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. About a year and 3 months.
So how do you, when you have him, right, because it's all individual, you have an intake process, which we kind of went over that. But once you're working with him, how do you start to develop his plan? Because you have a base plan, right? Sure. That you're going to throw out to everybody, but that's not going to last long from speaking to you last time. may not even start that way
right.
from your intake. So how do you go about that initial process to determine what his special needs, I guess, would be, or advantages that he would have?
So I have the diet system, if you will, and I like to say that that's like my favorites. So I think we all have that. Just like, say, your accessories when it comes to training, you've got your favorites, you've got ones that you never want to touch. Same kind of thing with diets, right? So I've got my favorites, and then I've got ones that I don't really want to touch, but I will if I have to, either because somebody's preferences or they just flat out will not eat this. You know, some guys will not eat seafood of any kind. You know, so I have to kind of be able to toggle. So I have that. And the thing that I think all my guys, when they come to me, the first thing that they say is they take a step back because it's so different, is that's actually on the back burner. So every guy will tell you that the first thing I lead with is, tell me about your day. And so I make them walk me through their day. I want to know when they get up. I want to know when they go to bed. I want to know, like, does your wife work? When does she get home? You know, what's that dynamic like? Does she need a couple hours of focus or priority, or does she know how this sport goes? Everybody's got their own unique situation behind closed doors. And with me, my big thing is I want to be turnkey. So I want to be able to drop what I need to get done into their lifestyle without them ever having to so much as like change their stride. That's where I start. So they walk me through their day. They walk me through when they train. They walk me through how long they train, what days are what, which that can still shift around. So if their coaches end up going, okay, now we're going to actually squat on Wednesdays, we're not squatting on Fridays anymore, that can all move. But I use that as the core, and then I take my favorite diet choices, if you will, and I put that into their lifestyle with how I combine the foods, the flow of their day. Like if a guy trains in the morning, I've got to make the flow of the day from my items far different than the gentleman who's training in the afternoon or the evening. You know, same thing where I have to build up throughout the day. So it's like each day is almost like a mini contest for me. So if that individual is going to train on a Thursday and he's going to train at 5 o'clock, well, I'm treating all the meals that happen leading up to that 5 o'clock on a Thursday as I am loading them up to peak them, not near to the degree we do at a contest, but I am stepping them up all the way into that training session. If it's an individual who trains in the morning, I'm going to step him up the night before, and then whatever I've got to work with that morning before he trains. Sometimes it's one meal, sometimes it's no meal. That's not ideal in my world, but I mean, they hire me to get shit done. And so I will get shit done in that case. And I'll, in that case, usually slide to the second to last meal of the day, the night before, and the last meal. And then we'll go for it. Usually the individuals who are like, look, I cannot train in the morning with food in my stomach. Usually I can get past that by about midway through that workout, going the Rice Krispie treat route or something like that. Usually because that takes up such small stomach volume, but it's still the carbs, it's still a fuel source. You know, so when the body's naturally wanting to tank, it can usually get it done. So there's always a workaround on everything. But so that, like with Austin, it's building it out to his schedule, which is the training part is the same as far as their times, since he and Nick do the same. Their jobs are very different. So, and the time of that, and then as far as also their home lives. So it's first lining up their lifestyle, and then once I have their lifestyle mapped out fully in front of me, then it's plugging in the foods, and then, like I said, building up to target their training and when they do that. Same thing when they're hitting their max parts of their blocks. If they're like, okay, this week's the big one, we're going, 90% on deadlifts or 90% on yoke, or, if I have a power lifter and it's his bench day, it's the same thing. This is the big week. This is where I'm going 90% and some chains or something. So it's the same thing, where I will target those and I will specifically cheat meal those. So I'll give them something that is usually a dirtier version of what their diet is. So if it might be like some sort of ground beef and potatoes or ground beef and rice, or if they financially have the means, steak and a potato or steak and rice or something for a meal, we're going to switch that out and go like burger fries, burger rice, more salt, more fat, just dirtier. But it's not something that's foreign to the body. It's not like I'm dropping, Korean food in on them all of a sudden, and they're not used to that. It's still from the same food groups, just dirty, because they're going to put that to use. A lot of people get the misconception that, his guys eat just all that sugar, all that junk. And it's like, they're only seeing that end result, right? So that's like saying that a guy, when he goes out and he does like his meet, and let's say the guy knocks out his bench, his squat, and he misses his deadlift. All they're seeing is that he missed the deadlift, or they're not seeing what happened that day behind the scenes. And so you don't get that full picture. For all you know, that guy like just overcame a back thing, you know, that he had done at his job or something, you know. And so it was a miracle he even had enough therapy to get in there and be able to get his hip flexors to release to get out and deadlift. For him, it's a big win. So it's that behind the scenes aspect. It's like they eat all that garbage. I mean, I can call it that. It's just mine. They eat all that garbage during a contest or in the ability to peak or during max training sessions because their core diet has set them up to be in the ability to do so.
Well, that garbage may also only make up 500 to 700 calories out of 6,000.
Correct. And when that is the mainstay and the normal, it's like my guys, Nick, again, to throw back to him, the first thing that he said after about 2 weeks is he didn't understand why. He's like, I feel like I'm a toddler. He goes, it's like when I eat a Rice Krispie treat now during the training, he goes, when I eat those things, he goes, I kind of feel like I can't even sit still. He goes, I don't understand why that's the case. He goes, I've eaten sweets or dicked around with things here and there. He goes, I don't ever feel like this. And I could give him something else. I can give him a brownie. I can give him whatever. He'll have that same sort of response because he's been conditioned to be that way, you know, because the regular core diet is conditioning him to be so efficient at how he handles nutrition and how he receives it. And so his insulin sensitivity is maximized so that when you get to a situation like that, you make hyper efficient use of it. None of us are supposed to feel like we need to take a nap after we eat spaghetti or after we eat, you know, Rice Krispie treats or something like that. But most of us do. We should feel like what happens when we gave our kids or grandma gave the kids sugar 2 hours before bed, and now the kids are up till midnight going bonkers. That's really how sugar is supposed to act in the body. That's the kind of influence it can have on your dopamine, your serotonin, and your body's ability to be extremely engaged and with no shutoff.
So is it the reason that it's in there all the time that they don't engage to it the way that you would prefer, right? In Nick's case, it was there all the time, right? So it's always, insulin's always all over the place, where now it's being strategically manipulated.
Correct. And so he can use it when he needs to use it. So, and you know, that brings up gonna kind of do a side shuffle here, but that brings up a great thing so I work with different NFL players. I've worked with Saquon Barkley, these Michael Pierce, like these are incredibly gifted individuals. And it's funny because I get to see like how different NFL teams work. And when I say no two teams do anything the same, I mean no two teams do anything the same. So it's the dietitians, it is the way that the teams prioritize nutrition or don't prioritize nutrition. It is the way that they will have, sometimes it's just a posted notebook paper that says what the food is for the day. And then sometimes it's 3 days in advance of every single meal that they'll have there in the training facility and they can pan it out. Sometimes it's an app. In the case of one particular team that really impressed the shit out of me. And I was able to go into the app, into their back end of the system and look at what the foods were going to be basically for 2 or 3 days ahead of time. I can make the selections for my client and then send it to them. And they love it. They walk into the training hall and they literally just pick whatever it is that I said on there. So if they knew they were going to have bison that day or crab cakes that day or whatever it was, I tell them what you're getting this from that, you're getting that from that, you're getting that from that. They love it. Because believe it or not, it's a free-for-all in the NFL as far as they have a core list of choices, but the guidance, they need to hire outside individuals like myself in order to make maximum use of what is good choices, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right choices for the individual. And when you're talking about the best of the best, the most elite of the elite, which is what any professional athlete, I don't care sport, it could be powerlifting, strongman, NFL, baseball, whatever the case may be, NBA. You're the best of the best. That means there's very little separating you from the next guy. You're all the cream of the crop. You all have elite genetics. You all are blessed beyond belief. But that extra 1 or 2% that individual can do to fully engage what their genetics have the ability to do, you're talking about the just between millions and millions of dollars and or Pro Bowls or accolades and things like that. And so the astonishing thing to me is that when it comes to the NFL, with what I do with my clients, especially we use strongman as an example, these are very large individuals who have to do things for maximum repetitions or maximum power over long periods of duration in terrible elements most of the time. It's almost always outdoor. World's Strongest Man is always outdoor. It's in the heat. It's in the sun. We were in Sacramento 3 or 4 years ago. The actual temperature, not the feels like, was 115, and we were on blacktop in front of the state capitol. The guy from Finland, Mika Torres, his shoes literally melted the sole into the blacktop pavement that he had just deadlifted on. Literally melted right off. So these are all very similar to NFL type of bodies and physiques. They're fast, they're powerful, they're strong, they're big. The guys, when we have a contest, the first thing I do is try to figure out, well, is this a moving contest? Is this a static contest? If it's a static contest, I feed them very differently. If it's a priority, if it's a moving contest or a lot of reps, Worlds tends to be more like that, I have to feed them like that, because of what's going to be required of the body. So it's a game plan, right? So if this game contest requires that this body is going to do something differently, then I need to feed them differently, right? Well, in the NFL, there's this enormous void. And so I've had 2 or 3 NFL general managers who have asked me different things in regard to their teams. I have had different dietitians that I've consulted with that'll call me, usually if there's a problem with a player that they have and they're not quite sure how to address it, especially when it comes to all the blood sugar and insulin management stuff. If a team game plans that week, so if your team knows that the team coming in is the quarterback is only affected by a lot of pressure. So you're going to get absolutely destroyed unless you bring a lot of pressure to that quarterback. So it's going to be a lot of blitzes. Maybe your defense is not necessarily known for being a blitz-heavy defense. You far prefer like dropping back, doing zone. The NFL, there's a total void there where it never. How many times have you seen a post-game interviews where the coaches are like, "Well, we had a great game plan. I was confident in it when I went in. We just didn't execute like I thought we would." I mean, how many times do you see that? 100% of the time?
All the time, yeah.
And yet never do they offer a solution. They just get out there and tell you the end result, but there's no solution on that. No, what you did is you didn't put your players in a proper position to execute the game plan that was different from the norm. Meaning, if you expected those defensive players to suddenly be able to blitz, meaning they're going to be going maximum fast twitch muscle fiber, maximum engagement, maximum explosion for 3 hours, when that's not normally how they play, and you didn't feed them any differently whatsoever to address those extremely ramped up energy requirements, no, you did not fail. The players did not fail to execute the game plan, and you didn't necessarily have a game plan that failed. It's that there's a void where no one communicated the game plan from that the defensive coordinator had to the dietitians. Hey, here's what we're doing this week, okay? So I'm going to need you to take care of my boys, get them set because, you do your thing. The dietitians are brilliant. They're wonderful people. But that doesn't mean that their specialty is dealing with how to peak large gentlemen in order to perform in a max capacity for ways that is a bit out of their wheelhouse. And that's all I have to do. Like that is my job, is making these big gentlemen take their bodies and their genetics places that it's never gone before and setting world records or winning these titles.
I want to take a second to throw a quick shout out to my friends over at Mastonomics. They have some of the greatest t-shirts. Their memes are incredible. Their YouTube gym tours are great. These drink spotter things, I got about 7 of them out here. Snap them on power racks, put smelling salts in it, drinks. I think they hold up to 10 pounds, or they have different sizes of these. These are great. They made coasters out of stall mats, which is amazing. But what I really wanted to let you know is to go check out gymradar.com. They launched a website that's going to help people find home gyms that they can train at, and to be able to put your own home gym on there and not only be able to find where it is, but see what they actually have. And it's also great for product reviews because people are putting the products that they have in this Gym Radar. Just go check it out. It's great. So it's www.gymradar.com. And also check out Massonomics. Check out their website, check out their Instagram. The memes are great. And check out their YouTube.
And it's nuts because everybody spends all this money and attention on ice baths and recovery and sauna and every treatment under the sun. Okay, all those things impact insulin, every single one of them. So the result you get out of an ice bath is because of its impacts on insulin and insulin sensitivity. The results you get from sauna and hot cold treatment is because of its impacts on insulin and insulin sensitivity. Every single thing that you do. So if you want your players to recover and to actually match the game plan that you rolled out there for them, and if you want them to be able to execute the game plan, you guys had better figure out a way in order to execute the defensive coordinators, if you will, relaying to the dietitians and the nutritionists, hey, this is what we're doing this week, so tell me what we're going to do differently so I can make sure and follow up on my guys that when they're strolling into the hall, you know, they're eating this, this, and this. They're making those choices. They're doing what they need to do in order to perform better. Because otherwise, literally, all you're doing with these billion-dollar corporations at the most time of impact is crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
Well, I would think that they would say to that, as long as my athletes are in a calorie surplus, I've covered all bases.
And to my response to that would be, how do you know that your athlete is in a calorie surplus? and secondarily, how do you know that your athlete in that surplus is able to make use efficiently of that surplus? There's a huge difference between loading someone and triggering response and loading someone like, no, that's just literally where it stopped, folks, because nothing happened. So there's two very different responses that happen, and no two guys are going to receive that the same. So it does take a shit ton of time, you know, and it's something that a dietitian is probably not necessarily solely able to facilitate because they've got an entire team they're trying to look after all at the same time. But just as they have a quarterback coach, a special teams coach, you know, a special assistant to the assistant, they've got every kind of coach under the sun, but they don't have that coach who's capable of listening to the game plan, determining what that means physically is going to be required of those athletes, and then relaying it. Okay, so in this week's situation, here's what I need you to do, you know, and that's where that just tremendous fall off happens. And I think that you see that in all the Achilles that are rampant across the NFL. I mean, give me a break. I mean, you used to see one Achilles injury happen in a season on one amongst all the teams. And now it's constant and it's rampant. And you typically will get an Achilles tear just like you will typically get a bicep tear. And what I mean by that is, so I could not tell you, and I think you're in the same boat, when it comes to strongman guys, how many strongman guys have torn a bicep from doing something as stupid as turning over a mattress? And it slipped out.
Yeah, easily 50% compared to if
it's not in the gym.
Yeah.
It's that. Mm-hmm. But what happens in that moment, Dave, right? At that moment that you have that mattress and you're about to flip it, your bicep is in a position of peak contraction. And it tears. Why? Because suddenly it's gone, right? So all that resistance is completely gone off that. The bicep goes to respond, you know, like when you snap a wet towel. Mm-hmm. But there's nowhere left for it to go, right? Because it's already at full extension. And you get that snap. And that's kind of the same thing that happens with when you've got your hydration off and you're watering these guys down too much as they are, but then you're trying to just inadvertently dump electrolytes on them. You're creating this situation where those electrolytes are firing either aggressively or not aggressively enough. And when you take these individuals that have that tremendous fast twitch muscle fiber development, like especially like your fast guys, if you notice, that tends to be the ones who more often than not are having the Achilles challenges within the league. And it's because they go to step off or they go to push off, but it's kind of like that flipping the mattress thing over, right? Because it's that same thing where they go, and because they're already at that contraction, either from the electrolytes being off, and it's usually because they're too watered down, that response isn't there and it's off, and you get that Achilles that kind of just misfires, just same as when that bicep is at that extension. Because it's sure as shit not the conditions that they're in. They're in a 65-degree air-conditioned stadium. They're practicing in bubbles. I mean, they've got somebody coming out to them every 5 minutes on a break, on third down, fourth down, punt, kick, whatever the case may be, TV timeouts. It's not like these bodies are 100% engaged 100% of the time for 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's that sudden and then pop. But that was not the case back in the day, even when guys didn't know what the hell they were doing, and were showing up with hangovers and running around in the sun, and you don't have, and people try to say, well, they're bigger, stronger, faster nowadays, to quote Mark Bell saying, but bigger, stronger, faster these days. It's like, so they're more of a pussy? Like, that's absurd. Like, an individual can be bigger, stronger, faster, but it does not mean that you're bigger, stronger, faster, more brittle. That is not something that makes any kind of sense whatsoever. Bigger means bigger, stronger means stronger, faster means faster, and that should be like a trinity, if you will, where everything is better. Not everything is more brittle. And that's where it's kind of unusual. And if you look at it, it tends to be things where you'll see these game plans. Now, I'm not talking about these things that are accidental, like foot slips, and a guy cuts wrong, or the shoes get, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about these just normal, like you saw even with Aaron Rodgers when his happened, like on that first play of the game a couple years ago. There was no impact. There was no anything. He just went back and it went. And that really shouldn't be the case. If you're following kind of that carb up measure where you're encouraging these players to retain maximum amount of fluid going into the game, you're achieving a lot. A dry player is a dangerous player. A dry player is very exposed because that means that everything is dry. So if you're encouraging water in, water out, and you can watch your guys in the locker room, they're constantly getting up and going and pissing. Constantly before games. Constantly at halftime. You're not dehydrated, technically, if you have to keep urinating. You're dehydrating the moment urine stops coming out. You're in trouble now. The tank is truly empty. But it's like the measures to keep the body to retaining fluid, to keep the joints more protective, more lubricated, more cushiony. You know as well as I do, from like the main benefit from loading up, be it powerlifting or with strongman, is that the joints sure feel a lot better.
Oh yeah.
The more fluid retention they have. And a lot of the super supplements, if you will, man, the best thing about them is the fact of the fluid retention that they cause, which lets you train so much without interference, so much more comfortably, basically carefree. Like before, you might like ease on down into the hole a little bit on a squat because your knees are always creaking, and all of a sudden it's like
well, that can start to be a dicey balance though, because if it's too much, then it's fluid retention around the heart, then your ability to breathe, to process oxygen will start to tank. And that is, with the strongman athletes you work with, that becomes a whole different, not the anabolics or super supplements, but the fact that they carry so much muscle. I can't think of any other athlete that carries those pounds of muscle, right? They're carrying way more muscle than alignment. The more muscle somebody carries, the more oxygen that they're using when they're doing the actual events or the training. And some of them play for the Denver Broncos, so they're playing at altitude too. Yes, which means they can get gassed fast. And it's I've seen this just through some of the clinics I've had. A well-trained strongman can be pushed really, really hard, and go, but when it falls, and it's just boom, and it falls hard. And it's only because they have 300 pounds of lean body mass. You put them next to somebody with 140 pounds of lean body mass and have them do the same work, proportionate to their frame. they're going to get destroyed by the smaller, because it's 300 fucking pounds. So that has to be accounted for, nutritionally, because there's no other way to do it.
Right.
There's just not. You can't like train that, because the energy demand is so fucking hot that, and they can only eat so much food.
Right.
That's the other thing is they get so damn big. I don't know how they can get in enough food, where what they end up doing is getting in the calories that they need to get in, but it's all shit, to be able to do that, but it doesn't work, as you know, because you end up working with these guys because it's inadequate fuel. So would you agree with that? That seems to, it happens in powerlifting too, when you start to move up into classes that have heavier lean body mass. Fat, it really doesn't. I mean, they're fat, right? It really doesn't utilize as much energy as what muscle does, but they put on so much muscle that it becomes super important what they actually put in. Right.
Oh, tremendously so. Because at the end of the day, and I'd mentioned this the last time I was here, I don't count calories of my guys at all. Zero, just nope, never happens. Because I don't believe in that. Because you're talking about energy, but at the same time, it's never the same. Now, it's absolutely essential if you're trying to create a base something in order to like construct a diet for yourself, so to speak. You got to have somewhere to start, and that is absolutely a great way of getting yourself a base unit. Then, of course, you're going to have to be able to adjust in and out of that, because the more active you are, inactive you are, or the more stress you're under, or the more sleep you're not getting, or, there's so many things that impact that when it comes to the elite level and performance, that to me is wasted time spent. It's time spent is on macros, because you are what you eat. So that was that whole, gummy bears versus steak thing, calories, 2,000 calories from gummy bears or 2,000 calories from steak have very drastically different actions in the body. One's protein and one's carbohydrates, but the fact though is still 2,000 calories is 2,000 calories. It just does very different things. So it's more important to target your macros. So especially these bigger athletes. So protein and carbohydrates, and then fat from there. And that's the focus. So if you're a 340-pound guy, 500 grams of carbohydrates, 340 grams of protein, something like that, versus 5,000 calories. Because it's far more important that they're specialized calories is kind of the way I like to put it. If you want to, same thing, bodybuilding, figure, I've done bikini girls, you name it. At the end of the day, it's it's like being an artist. You're using the food to sculpt the figure that you're trying to sculpt, right? And so how do you do that? Well, your tools are the protein, your tools are the carbohydrates, your tools are the fat. And so that's how you end up sculpting what you want. In the case of a figure girl or a bikini girl versus a 440-pound strongman, it's an extremely large sculpture that requires extremely large tools. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to increase their muscle. I'm trying to increase his muscle. I'm trying to minimize waste. So I'm trying to minimize, in a ridiculous abundance, because that starts to work against you too, right? Though the difference being in strongman, body fat is not necessarily the enemy. In fact, oftentimes it's a blessing, because again, with the joints and things like that, and the ability to hold fluid, mass still holds fluid. And so a leaner, more ripped physique just does not have the capacity to hold fluid near like a more rotund physique, if you will. And obviously for the joints and the ability to have that sustenance and take the pounding, more mass definitely helps in that regard. So it's definitely a priority as far as like proteins, carbs, fats, and then using those as your tool in order to get that kind of response that you want, more so than just calories or just kind of a random feeding, kind of like that buffet style that you'll see in the NFL with, all these different choices, and they're good choices. They're excellent choices. But you got a lot of different individuals with a lot of different genetics and a lot of different responses to food. And they really need to, they made the investment to sign all those players. You're spending all that money on a guy. Wouldn't you want to get the best for your money, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, and to be able to really dial it in, because right now what you've got typically ends up being a guy who's incredible, who's genetically best, who's genetically blessed, and who has access to very good nutrition. But what happens if he had access to perfect nutrition for him specifically? And that's why you've seen like Tom Brady, even with the longevity they have with his career. You know, his guy took things for Tom down a path that probably was not a way that I would have gone with things at all.
But it was still specialized.
But it was specialized, and it was what he had identified was best to get Tom to react. And that's what it's about, right? It's not about like if I agree with that diet approach. It's about that diet approach was identified as being the best for the way he was watching how Tom would respond and then making his gauges and his assessments. And so it was perfect for that individual. And that's how it should be. But Tom spent all that money himself. That was all his investment. That was not the team in any way, shape, or form doing that. That was him. Like, and that the guys that have hired me, it's that same thing. And I'm certainly happy that they do hire me. But at the same time, I can identify like it's unfortunate that they do have to hire me.
Yeah, but they're replaceable. Like, so if I was, you see what I'm saying? If I was the person that owned the league, you know, and I'm paying you X million dollars per year, it's your job to show up ready. You know, it's my job to coach, the game. And if you can't show up ready, well, fuck it, he will.
No,
I mean, that's real world.
That's a good point.
It would kind of fall back on the player to be able to know that, but the player has to be educated enough to know this option exists. And I don't think that's the case at all.
But they would readily follow if, you know, hey, coach says we got to eat this or that this week because we're going to blitz heavy this week. So, man, I got to get this, I got to get that. They really will do that. They really do want to be at their best as an individual. They want to be at their very best for their team. You know, each one of those guys doesn't want to let the other guy down, you know, for sure. And so and I've had a guy tell me, there's no worse feeling, and this is why he had hired me in the first place. There's no worse feeling than you're in an overtime game and you know you are absolutely spent. And then you're sitting there trying to think about why are you so spent right now when you know the defense is out there and he knows hopefully the offense is going to get back out. And you know that you just got nothing left. Like you're hoping to God that the ball almost doesn't come to you because you don't want to let the guys down. And then he was like, and I started thinking about, well, what did I eat that day? And he's like, you know what, man, I skipped breakfast. And he was like, and I was trying to think about what I had for dinner the night before. And I just grabbed there was a sandwich in the hotel. I just grabbed that. And I was like, really? He goes, I mean, they got the buffet, they got stuff set out there for you. Dude, how the hell am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to get? And it's like, that's when it really started clicking for me as far as like, okay, this is it's an unusual situation. You know, there's a niche that exists, and it's just interesting when you see that and you're like, wow, how could that even be? Like,
yeah, I know.
It's one of those things that's right in front of the face. And I guess because it's right in front of the face, you miss it. Because they're so off in the weeds on the minutia of everything. Some of these teams, like the Houston Texans, I'm from Houston, and I've been blessed to know several of the guys. I've had John Weeks, who's an amazing guy, he's going into his 17th year as a long snapper, still in the NFL, and he just made the Pro Bowl. I mean, you talk about a GOAT. At that position, man, put a statue up. That dude, there'll never be another one of him, not with a career that long, and not who's making the Pro Bowl at his 16th year in the league this year with San Francisco. But the Texans organization is amazing where, I mean, you would not, some of these teams I see, and I'm blessed to get to see kind of the behind the curtains. Some of these teams really have a small unit of personnel that work with the athletes from top to bottom. It's just small, you know, some of them have enormous assets where the list of individuals that are available and accessible from doing data analytics to science assessments, to studying the players' contractions. I mean, there's a lot going on. Some of these teams, and the Texans are one of them, where they have so many assets in place to get the most out of their players. And I think they were even voted like one of the top couple of organizations by the other players in the leagues as far as like just assets available to the players so that they feel like the team is helping to put them in a position to be the very best that they can be. You know, and there's some owners prioritize and some don't. But so I've seen all the spectrums. I've seen assets of 4 trying to take care of all these individuals seemingly. And I've seen, like the Texans where there's so many people doing so many things because they just don't want to leave any stone unturned. But guess what they still don't have? They still don't have anything that addresses a specific game plan where, okay, we're going to blitz heavy. There's still nothing there that translates that piece. But they have so many other things, and I think it's just because it's right in front of the face, because all the minutiae are just checked, right? I mean, there's nothing, especially the recovery aspect of things.
Wouldn't it be safe to, if you were to prepare them, just to assume that's going to be the case because the game plan could change?
That's exactly what I do. And so Michael Pierce, I worked with him, and that is, again, another incredibly sweet, just rock solid of a human being. I mean, you talk about a role model, for your kids or whatever. He's just a great person with the best personality. But it's the same thing. So I took it upon myself every week. I would say, okay, kind of what we've been doing in practice this week. And he would tell me, and I would be like, okay. And so then I, like armchair quarterback or whatever, I'm having to sit there and take the information that I'm being given from my athletes. And I'm like, okay. So then if they're going to ask that of him this week, then that, because, if a team is a run heavy team, Michael's position, he's stopping the run. And because of Michael being so incredibly good at his job, they would always put 2 or 3 guys on him to try to be able to run the ball to get through him.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment because we do read the comments, and one of them that keeps popping up more frequently than not is, I can't believe this video doesn't get more views. Take a minute to subscribe, leave a comment, and share. It really does help.
If it's a pass-heavy team, we're not going to have that type of a week, but Michael's going to be rushing the quarterback more. So that's a whole other way that I had to feed him, And so he got a sack of Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. You don't do that at Michael's size. He's a very large individual, powerful, kind of like one of my strongman guys. But at 360 pounds, you're not sacking in the fourth quarter Patrick Mahomes if you have an empty gas tank. Patrick Mahomes can move, and Michael's sacking him. And it's because of that same sort of a thing. So I'm having to take that role and do that in order to put my player, my client, in the best position that they can be. But it would sure be a lot easier on me if there was an actual individual who that was their role, because that doesn't mean that the guy on each side of Michael or the guys behind Michael have been as prepared as he is at that moment too. So, and they want to do their very best too. They want to be able to execute the game plan and come through for the coach. So it's like there's, the strongest link in a chain or the weakest link in a chain. It's sort of like that. You just, at the NFL level, especially collegiate level, whatever it is, you don't want any weak link in any chain, given all that's at stake, really.
I got a question about the nutrition stuff. There's so many diets out there that, like you kind of mentioned Tom Brady. I was already thinking he had his own special diet as well. All these other diets like keto or carnivore or whatever all these are, do you think some of them are just kind of not the best? Because I know you said Tom Brady, you said that's not the approach you would take, but it worked for him because it's all individualized. Are there some out there that just overall you think would not be really beneficial, or do you think all of these other diets have their place and have their purpose for that certain person?
That is an outstanding question, because you let me get right to the heart of the matter on that kind of with one swoop. So it at the end of the day, if it's a keto diet, a carnivore diet, there's the high carb diet. Joe Binley's a friend of mine. And so the high carb diet, or candy diet as they call it, but I just call it high carb diet. You've got Mediterranean diets, you've got vegan diet. Take the vegan diet out of it, because there are moral and ethical reasons that are motivating those individuals to make those choices, and you want to respect that. So you leave that out. I'm just talking about things that are similar. All these types of diets, at the end of the day, do their thing because of their actions on the body's, at the end of the day, insulin system. So it's either reducing the body's insulin response or it's engaging the body's insulin response. But at the core, that is what those diets are all doing. In the case of carnivore or keto, minimal carbohydrate, obviously, so minimal impact as far as insulin release. Notice I didn't say none, because anything you eat still creates some sort of an insulin response. You know, you can just eat like a hamburger, just the meat, and check your blood sugar afterwards, and it will go up. It just doesn't go up much. You might have been 80, you eat your hamburger, and maybe you're at like 93. So minimal, and then it comes back down to your baseline. But all of these different diets, at the end of the day, do their thing because of how they influence the actions of insulin. GLPs, right? That's all the rage, you know. So all your GLP-1s and all these things that are out there, how do they work? Same thing. They're influencing the actions of insulin. They're either A, influencing the actions of insulin through slowing gastric emptying, because the rate that your digestive system processes food greatly influences your insulin response. So you're drastically slowing and kind of like going into stealth mode. You're trying to like eat the food and just have it trickle out into the system to kind of not wake mom and dad up because you came in past midnight, so to speak. That's how they're working. And some of them also increase your body's insulin sensitivity. So that's kind of a twofold approach. But every diet does its thing because of, ultimately, when it's all said and done, how it influenced the actions of insulin in the body. So I don't necessarily think that any one of those diets is bad or good or different. I would first look at it from the perspective of the person's lifestyle. If carnivore or keto or the high carb diet or whatever these things are, if that works within that person's lifestyle, so this is when they wake up, this is when they go to bed, do they work shift work? You know, are they a police officer? Are they a firefighter? All these things that can influence their ability to be consistent, right? Consistency influences the actions of insulin in the body. Every single thing you do influences that. And so there's no right or wrong diet for an individual from that perspective, as much as I feel there is what is the right diet that will enable you to be consistent and to be successful within your lifestyle, within your marriage, within your family dynamics. Do you have kids that one has to go to soccer, and then an hour later this one has to go to volleyball, and then an hour later the twins have to go to football practice? Like, okay, but then how's the accessibility of your diet fall into your lifestyle? If you can pull that off with your carnivore, your keto, because you're a hardcore meal prepper and you stay up late at night maybe, and your lifestyle, even though it's that dynamic, you can still get it done, that's great. But if you're an individual that needs to be able to make a choice on the go or on the run, or you're out and you're in between checking on grandma and running the two kids to volleyball, then that's probably not the right diet for you. Probably you need that variety to where you have the freedom and you can make better educated choices for what you have to work with. So I'm big on that, because so many people think through marketing and diets getting fancy names and all this stuff that they can't be successful because they can't afford to eat like that. And it's really not about that. It's about your lifestyle. You can be successful. Don't worry about, it's actually about what you can make do with how you can make it work. It's like I tell people, there's a good, better, best when it comes to diets. Best, if you can afford to hit the organic and the grass-fed and the grass-finished and the microgreens, if you can make that your lifestyle, and that is perfectly in sync for you, by all means, do that. If that is cost prohibitive for you and just time-wise and accessibility-wise it makes no sense, then that's probably not the way to go. And then maybe you can't do the best, but you can do the good. And maybe the good involves you're rolling through a Culver's and getting a grilled chicken breast sandwich, throwing away the buns, but you're getting your chicken that way. Is it pumped up? Is it got some goodies in it? Absolutely. Is it sure a hell of a lot better than nothing. And it's sure a hell of a lot better than not trying at all and just being, fuck it, I can't be successful because it's either got to be the microgreens, the grass-fed, the grass-finished, or I cannot be. That's not true. We know from back in our day, right? Like, How many guys you know that were big and strong as a bull and they ate like off-brand boxes of macaroni and cheese and the cheapest ground beef they could get?
All of them. There
we go. And that's really at the truth of what all of it is. Everybody can, to quote Brian, be great, but everybody, I just really hope that if I do anything in this exposure or with my life's work of my career or whatever, I hope if anybody takes anything away, it's that everybody can be the very best that they can be. Tune out all that outside noise and all that whatever. Focus on your lifestyle. And then after you've focused on your lifestyle and you've identified what your morning, noon, night, and workout looks like, then put those food choices in around that. You know to focus on protein. You don't need me to tell you that, but protein, carbohydrates, fats, but focus on your lifestyle and make that work. And don't get caught up in all the noise of, it's got to be the tenderloin, or you just can't make it in this go. You can't be successful without the can't be strong, Dave, without tenderloin and micrograms.
Yeah. If we spin this back into performance, and you've been around a long time, so we're not super old, but old enough to have seen a lot of things come and go. And we've spoken a lot about insulin, and we've seen insulin come on the scene in the past decade to be used as a PD. It's probably being used before.
90s was a big emergence.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And one thing I've always wondered with that is when it's in the performance and the strength athlete sector is typically when you see the protocols that will be implemented for that, it's a change of their diet, right? Because if it's intra or if it's post or whatever it is, the carbohydrates are always associated with it. It's kind of how it falls in there. In progress, it makes a difference, right? It's without a question, it makes a huge difference. But, and you would know this, what if they didn't use the insulin, but just manipulated the carbohydrates the way that they were doing without the insulin? You see what I'm saying? It's is insulin the bait, that makes them do what they should have been doing the first time? Yeah. But it may not have to be the same number of carbs, right? Because the insulin are going to shuttle a higher amount of carbs. But half of that, from what they were doing from the start, right? Because you see where I'm going with that?
1,000%. Because at the end of the day, enhancing your body's own ability to receive nutrition is where it starts and stops. With any diet, with any approach, with super supplements, with insulin, it is enhancing your body's ability to be extremely efficient. Making the right diet choices, you can do that on your own. You can train your body to be more sensitive to the actions of insulin. And it's not by how most people think. Back to the carnivore and keto and that type of stuff. Again, everything has its place. It has its influence, and it's successful when it comes to weight loss because it's kind of putting the body's insulin response to sleep, like giving it a nap for a while you're on that diet, more or less. But the problem that you have is that when you take a situation like that, you're untraining the body. So in my world, I'm training my guys to be hyper responsive to the actions of insulin through exposure to insulin, through exposure to carbohydrates. Because like anything in life, we get good at things through repetition, or we get good at things in life not by walking around and avoiding it. Like whoever got great at their job because they avoided going to work every day. Like you got to go through that door, right? And then do your shit and then bump. Hopefully you get better at what you do. Most individuals, after they come out of carnivore or keto, they'll try to have even just a moderate, normal, responsible amount of carbohydrates introduced into their day, and they cannot handle it at all. Their blood glucose levels shoot up into, and I'll call it a fake diabetic level because they're not truly diabetic at that point, but a fake diabetic level. Mark, if you remember, so Mark had been doing his running, and when he was kind of transitioning out of the keto thing and carnivore and stuff, he had made a post or whatever because I had responded to him, wishing him well, making sure he was all right. But he had found himself in the hospital because he had just a bizarre blood sugar reading that wasn't true. but it was just the body there's no other term. The body temporarily forgot what the fuck to do with the carbohydrate, you know? And so his blood glucose levels just went up high, and that's what commonly happens to individuals. So it's kind of like you when you're coming back out of the weight cut, and it's kind of like slowly, progressively getting back into things. That's the right way of doing it, and how you can get around that. But to Dave's question, ultimately, it's, do you need to take exogenous? Again, I have been using and exposed to insulin from an athletic capacity since the 90s, the early 90s. And so, I mean, there, you know, any way it can or cannot, we learn a lot from our mistakes.
Yeah.
Any way it can or cannot be used and implemented, I have been down that road. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about, you know, using it per meal, if you're talking about going the Lantus-Levermeer aspect and, you know, while you sleep, the long acting to give yourself a base or foundation. It's like, or couldn't we just time our nutrient delivery as we eat and control our exposure to carbohydrates and maximize our ability to make use of those carbohydrates through other assisted means, such as timing it, you know, prior to training. You know, why? Well, because then that training through the pump is going to, from the muscle contractions, is going to help clear glucose from the system. You know, the enhanced oxygenation of being active is also going to have an impact. Your insulin will have its impact. You can put a lot of things to work for you to take care of business on your own. And yet you don't find yourself in this situation of boxing yourself into a corner, because what happens at the end of the day, you get less sensitive to the actions of insulin by the more constant your exposure to circulating insulin in the blood is. So if you have a baseline of exogenous, you know, floating through your system, long-acting insulin, your cells are exposed to that constantly. The receptors, the insulin receptors, just like anything in life, you expose something over and over and over again, your body gets dull to it. So it's diminishing returns. And every single individual who's ever utilized that will attest to, at first, I don't want to give the numbers because I just don't want people getting out there getting frisky on their own, so to speak, without guidance. But you start at this level, and that's okay for a couple of weeks. Like, wow, this might be the greatest thing ever. And then all of a sudden, man, nothing really happened. So then it goes up a little bit. And that goes up a little bit, and it goes up a little. And the next thing you know, I mean, the amounts that you end up at, even by diabetic standards, for a true type 1 diabetic would be considered, God damn, that's a lot of fucking insulin. Mm-hmm. Because you're consistently untraining your body to be responsive to the actions of insulin, because it's just so saturated in there that it's not getting through anymore. The receptors are dull. The body's not actually having to respond much on its own. And then you've got that whole cascade of other effects that happen, you know, because you've got cortisol. So you've got somebody already with very high circulating levels of insulin. And then let's say maybe GH is in the equation. Well,
it will be if
insulin. Exactly. So it has to be, because you're creating a fake, if you will, diabetic environment. So at the end of the day, exactly like you said, can't you just end up in the same spot? So let's say everybody started off at A, two groups of people. Group A starts off manipulating their body's own response to insulin through nutrition and timing of activities and things like that, and trying to maximize their sleep and, you know, taking into consideration, though, factors like heat, which also has a profound impact on reducing your sensitivity to insulin. But you have this individual who's focused on manipulating everything on their own here. And then you have individual B, who's just going to take it. At the end of the day, by the time Group A finds themselves, let's say, up to letter D in the alphabet, oh, Group B's ahead. Group B is going to find themselves, probably about K. But then it's like tortoise in the hare. Then it's going to be like, uh-oh. Then it's going to take a long time to get to L, to get to M, because all the response time and all the sensitivity is just greatly reducing as you're going along. Meanwhile, this one is actually increasing. Group A is increasing their sensitivity to insulin and carbohydrates all along. So Group B is reducing. Group A is actually increasing. So they're now speeding up, passing them and leaving them in the dust, basically.
That's a great analogy for that. Now I can say that the group A later down the line can throw in, is.
Yeah. And that's true too. Through, again, timing, and because what have they done? They have created themselves to be a hyper responder.
Yes.
And I think in the end of the day, we all want to ultimately find ourselves a hyper responder, either to training or to nutrition in any way, shape, or form. So when you find that, then that's a whole other world, because you've taken the time to focus on technique or form, or in this case, nutrition.
Yeah, all the basic stuff is there for it to actually be utilized at that higher capacity. But that's always been a strange one to me, because that scenario usually isn't the case, in the demographic that I'm in. It is going to be that B group, to where the diet was kind of a train wreck to begin with. And then they'll start that, and then all of a sudden the diet all cleans up, that all goes in there, and the same scenario that you just plays out.
Well, in my world too. Now, again, keep in mind, I will absolutely recognize and respect that bodybuilding is a completely different animal, because like I did the last time, show and go. And my pro bodybuilder friends will be the first thing to say, fuck all, ain't no way I can physically exert myself and train like a strongman for 3 or 4 hours, which is how long strongman training sessions are. Not possible. My strongman guys can. But there comes that point where at the end of the day, when it comes just to like a strongman and that type of a situation, your ability to have a say in everything you do should be paramount. And I feel that should be the outlook when you're trying to decide what decisions you make regarding anything. Could be super supplements, could be food, could be nutrition. The moment you find yourself where there's a lot left to chance, you're in trouble. And I guess I'm a control freak, but when it comes to my athletes, I cannot tolerate leaving things to chance. I need to know I have a very predictable response that I'm going to get to, that also has a margin for curve, a curve to it, because I know goddamn good and well, nothing in this world ever goes exactly to plan, no matter what your intentions are. And so I've got to be able to operate off that curve, but through a very predictive response by the time I hit that curve. When you are in a situation where it's exogenous, such as the bodybuilding type of world, that can't work in the strongman world doing that, because the second you find variables that are out of your control, like, oh yes, I'm going to measure it because I'm going to have this amount of carbs, so I'm going to take this amount of insulin with it. There, I did my thing. Yes, you did. Guess what? You're outside on that day that you've done that, and it's 100-degree day and high humidity and sunshine. Guess what? The response is not going to be what you thought it was going to be. And in fact, you literally have lost all control. And this is going to go however this goes. And you better have some countermeasures ready, because that individual, because of the effects of the sun and the heat, is either going to end up way too high because they're going to be so incredibly resistant to the actions of that insulin, or on rare occasions in that situation, they're going to end up too low. And usually that's the combination of how they exerted themselves. But like say in the bodybuilding world, that doesn't necessarily happen. But you can't have a strength athlete who's out there and they're doing things that are all artificially propped up, and then the weather factor comes in, or the downtime factor comes in. Like, let's say they're like, okay, start time is at noon, everybody warm up, and everybody warms up, and then it rains. I've been there. I've done that repeatedly. It rains and we're in a 2-hour rain delay. God bless the individual who's not doing things through manipulating the food to get those results, because he is literally in a free-for-all on whatever's going to take place. He has lost all control, and it's going to go how it goes. Whereas I can fine-tune, and I can be very precision-based, because it's all manipulating that individual's response. I'm not just manipulating a drug, because at the end of the day, that's what insulin is. When you take a drug and it can't do its job, it's no different than if somebody was dehydrated and needed an IV bag, and you didn't put the fucking needle in. So the IV bag is just hanging there with the hose flopping in the wind. It's that same sort of a thing. Nothing can happen because you put yourself in a position where you can't respond. Diabetics find themselves in trouble all the time, because they'll have something as simple as an apple on a hot day, and go outside in the sun to watch the grandkids play catch in the yard, and their blood sugar levels will go to 200 off a fucking apple. 30, 40 grams of carbs. And they'll be the first ones to say, well, that never happens. Yep, never happens. Because it happened to be a sunny day. The sun was out. It was a hot day. All those things drastically impact the body when it comes to how it's receptive to the actions of insulin.
I just want to take a moment to let you know about our crew. What our crew is, it allows the show to stay independent, and it's the reason why the podcast is still here now. The podcast is free to listen to, but it's not free to produce. It keeps going because of the sales through elitefts, our show sponsors, but more importantly, our crew members. The reason I love this is for many reasons, is it keeps the show independent. So I can pick who I want to speak to. I can pick what topics I want to speak to, and I don't have to be accountable to anybody. I just go off what the crew members want and what the audience wants, and I don't have to deal with all the other bullcrap that's associated with the podcast world. In return, what you get with the crew is ad-free episodes that are released a day ahead of time. You get access to our Discord community, which has AMAs, like 60 ebooks. We try to put a new ebook out every single month. Access to our coaching community with form checks, training Q&As. It also gives you invitations to our training retreats that are out here in the gym once or twice a year. 76% of all the people that joined in 2022 are still members now. Right now, you can either go month to month or get 2 months free with an annual plan. Just look for the link in the description, look at the QR code, or search elitefts.com crew and join today. It means a lot.
And it's through learning that along the way and approaching the body from a position of imperfection, I think is how I ended up in the situation I ended up with whatever it is that I've been able to create for these athletes and to do the things that I've done. Is there just are no variables. And I have to have the ability to react. And if my reaction is off the table, nah, I don't want to do that.
How do you navigate then the peptide space with these guys now? Because there's new peptide every fucking day, it seems like, and they're just going to throw the shit in there, but you don't know what that reaction's going to have, action or reaction. And there's more than one.
Oh, way more than one. Way more than one. Dave, I sound like the grumpy old grandpa when it comes to these. Until an individual with me is able to have their strength on the level of who they're chasing, then I find it ridiculous for them to think that the peptides per se are what's going to be that makes that difference. And it's like you say, no, you just didn't fucking work hard enough.
Yeah.
It really is that, because at the end of the day, there really are no new steroids out. There really aren't. The best ones are still the old ones. Your basics, still the best. They've tried to plop out some new, oh, look, this one was a forgotten patent somewhere in Russia. And now, there was a phase where I'll never forget mint was a thing. Remember that?
Yeah. It still comes back every now and again.
What the fuck? And I'll never forget, like, individuals like call me, man, I just think I'm losing out here because like I'm not doing mint. And I'm like, come again? Not mint, it's just new stuff. And I'm like, hey, it's not new. It's been left in the dust repeatedly because it fucking sucks. I go, so I don't care that you have a buddy that recently came across this. Let me tell you, the reason why he recently came across this is because for a while it sat in the gray area. Where it was like not illegal, but yet kind of was, kind of wasn't. So he could get it. So basically your buddy's like that 18-year-old kid that's like, oh man, I don't mean to alarm anybody, but I'm taking it up a notch. I'm going to hit some SARMs. Okay. You're not taking up a notch of anything. If you would just take 200 milligrams of testosterone a week, which has been around since the 60s or something, you would far exceed your cutting edge technology SARM that you think is going to give you these incredible attributes. So for me, it's that kind of thing. That Mint is just like the greatest example. Dave, I couldn't tell you how many phone calls I fielded for a while. Probably, God, what's it been? Maybe 6-7 years back, I guess. And it was, I heard so-and-so's doing this. And I'm like, that's great. But guess what? The irony of this is so-and-so has never beaten you. and yet you want me to change direction based off of an individual who's never beaten you because we don't do that. I'm like, no, we're not fucking doing that. And I said, better yet, wait and see how this individual pans out in about 60 days from now. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's the same thing. That individual who like was slightly intimidating for a while because they'd thrown on 30 or 40 pounds of just sheer fluid retention madness, got to feeling ungodly bad and abandoned that quickly, you know? And then the athletes, you know, just kind of like, oh, okay, I kind of see why we do things the way they do. It's like, yeah, it's not like I lack knowledge of new things that come out, or it's not like I like got my head in the sand, you know? No, I know what works, but most importantly, I know how to manipulate at 100% everything out there that does work.
Yeah.
And I know how to counter at 100% everything out there that does work if something goes awry. And I know what that corrective course and measure is. That to me is way more powerful than me fucking around with a new thing that comes out just because it's the latest buzz thing or whatever. Because trust me, it's not, you know, it's just not. When it comes to the peptides, is BPC 157, TB5, are they incredible for wound healing? And oh shit, yes. That's a very specific application. I don't count that as like performance enhancing, you know, but is that incredibly invaluable when it comes to, have I seen it? Most importantly, not have I heard it, have I watched it, have I seen it, have I been in the applications and seen it do incredibly wondrous rebounds coming off of what should have been long surgical recoveries? 150%. But that's a very useful tool to me in a tool shed. That is a tool. That is a recovery item. That to me is you know, the ice bath, if you will. That is the massage gun. That is a very specific application, and I've seen it work incredibly well so many times. The other things, like all the other different peptides, I do like Redatrutide. I like Redatrutide a lot because, you know how I had my analogy of A and B, and you kind of get to and then this one leaves that one in the dust. Redatrutide, to me, is similar in that regard because you can low dose that, meaning I'm just big on controllable variables and being able to pivot, or at least being able to be corrective. And Redatrutide, I feel, I've probably messed with that for about the last year and a half. Like, it's only like the last couple of months most folks seem to really be talking about it. But Redatrutide, over a period of, say, 4 months, reminds me a lot of how the initial thought was with creatine. When creatine first came out and Bill Phillips was like, hey, look, I've got this. It was 20 grams, right? So it was like mega dose it for a week, 5 days, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Mega dose it for a week, and then you can maintenance it. But over time, what have they basically found out? When it comes to the physicality, performance, the weight gain, if you will, all that, when it's all said and done at the end of about 30 or 45 days, is the fellow that went the 20-gram route, is he that much different than the fellow that just went the 5-gram route the whole way? So that's kind of the tortoise and the hare thing again. Basically ended up at the same spot in this case, more or less. Retta seems to be like that too. I probably said it right. The actual pharmaceutical pronunciation of it, I cannot say correctly. So, but anyway, so Retta, which that's probably supposed to be Rita. But anyway, that thing, at the end of 4 months, an individual who does it, let's say 2 milligrams versus an individual who does it at say 5 or 6, they're not that much different. Like, the end result really isn't that much different. And so that kind of thing always intrigues me because I'm always like big on bang for the buck. Like, what can you minimally utilize and get a lot out of, especially, of course, the key being if you manipulate the diet correctly in order to let it do its thing. What I like most about that one is that like the other two, the GLP-3 is what this one is. The other, ones are GLP-1s, is that this one doesn't rely mainly on delaying gastric emptying. This one, it does somewhat on that degree, but its main impact is it's incredible on its ability to enhance insulin sensitivity. It's really, really good at that, to the point where, like I said, I'm about 1.5 years probably of playing around with it. And I've seen individuals stop at the end of the 4 months and continue to have exactly as consistent, measurable responses to both their diet, their training, everything, as if they were still on it. So that beneficial impact it has on the insulin sensitivity seems to carry on far after you go ahead and stop the actual use. Now, that's always something that's appealing to me, something that seems to continue to have benefits even after you stop, whereas something that seems to either return to normal or, in worst case scenario, has you worse off than you were before. So that has been an interesting one. GHK, I mean, there's a lot of them, when it comes to wound healing, things like that can be beneficial. But when it comes to actual, let's just say, performance enhancing, nah. Tried and true.
Yeah.
Tried and true just trumps.
Were there any other topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up? We kind of got into the recovery tactics. Go into that. Elaborate a little bit more on that, because that was really short, but I think people need to hear that. The recovery tactics, sauna, ice bath. That's kind of, it's odd because it's not in vogue now. It came fast and it kind of like left fast. Interesting, especially when you've been around as long as what we have.
Right.
How many things do that? Like, if these were actually the greatest thing in the world, wouldn't they still kind of be talked about all the time?
How often does that happen?
All the time.
I mean, how often does that happen? And that's why I was like, hey, so I'm still all about the tried and true. Because again, they've been around since the 60s or whatever. Like, they work. There's not an individual who can argue in any way, shape, or form, well, that stuff doesn't work. Really? Like, it's not possible.
Yeah.
The old standards, the old tried and trues, they do what they do. Some have more risks than others, but they do what they do. And that's the bottom line. None of them have come and gone. Testosterone didn't become a thing and then vanish on us in the 70s because, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there was a lot to see there. And in fact, we've even progressed to today where, like, now you even have cardiologists who prescribe testosterone in order to strengthen the heart, because somewhere along the line, the light bulb went on. Like, holy shit, I don't mean to alarm anybody, but did you know that the heart is a muscle and you could actually strengthen it if somebody was having some weakness there? There's this thing called testosterone. I mean, who knew? It's like when they tried to say that, there used to be that warning on the back of the testosterone boxes. And it was, some of the states would have, can cause cancer, this, that, and the other, prostate cancer. Really? That was the most ludicrous take of all. So testosterone causes prostate cancer. If that was the case, common sense and deductive reasoning says none of us would have fucking made it out past the age of 25. None of us have a testosterone level in our lives higher than between the ages of like 15 and 25, if you will. But we all, an 18-year-old with prostate cancer?
No, but I know older ones when the
testosterone when the testosterone isn't there. But we chose to vilify the testosterone. No, I think what happens, and again, deductive reasoning, common sense says, so at that stage of life, as testosterone levels decline, it would appear as though, just like with anything else, estrogen begins to take on a more active or predominant role in the body, and it is the role of estrogen that is most likely poking the bear when it comes to the prostate, because that ratio is all fucked. It's not like, when we're at our age and or even at our peak, and let's say we've got an 1,000, level testosterone, and our estradiol might be like sitting around 30 or something. Well, now all of a sudden, if that same gentleman has lived life and he's found himself aged, and he's now got a testosterone level of 110 and an estrogen level of 40, if you think shit doesn't go haywire, that is where, the wheels come off the bus with that. And so it's those types of things that you're just like, how can that be? That makes absolutely no sense what we're force fed, you know.
How can people go about finding you? What's the best way to find you?
My website, so just nathanpayton.com. You can message me on there or email me, either or. Pro Body Coach on Instagram. Also, you know, I have an app in conjunction with Brian Shaw, so it's the Shaw Elite app. And so I handle the consulting on the nutrition aspect of that. And my good friend Joe Ken House, who I can't call him Joe, I call him House. So House handles the training program on there along with Brian and Carrie as well. So that's an amazing, excellent resource as well that I'm also involved in. And on that note, because I just brought up House, there's ways that you can manipulate insulin to the body, obviously with training. You know, I talked about that with contractions and all those types of things. But conditioning has really become a thing for strongman lately. And it's not just conditioning them to, like, so they don't gas out, you know, gasping for air when they do events, but it's also through that conditioning training, they're also having an impact on their insulin levels because they're making themselves more sensitive to the actions of insulin through all that additional cardiovascular work, that they do.
So when you say cardiovascular work, are you speaking anaerobic or aerobic?
He's got them doing all the above. So you name it, from just, it's just constant body in motion through, especially with House. He's got his whole, you know, go to A, go to B, go to C, go to D. He's got his rotation in play. So he has
all heart rate, all zones.
Yes. Okay. And I mean, I worked with him with Brian for World's Strongest Man Prep, and that was astonishing to watch when he would implement his the book is Strongman for Conditioning for the Strongman Athlete. But when he would implement his conditioning, it was amazing to watch the response that it would have on Brian and what I then needed to in turn do for the diet. So because of that, Brian's sensitivity and being able to, what I told House was like slingshotting Brian. So I could slingshot him into his training and get an even greater effect. So he could do the conditioning and then go from the conditioning to an actual training specific event that he was to do that day. And because of that, he had a higher capacity for not only the food, but the nutrition, the carbohydrates. So it went against the grain in every aspect. So, you know, you always hear about, you know, don't do cardio before you train, you know, it'll wreck your ability to do anything or whatever. And that, I'm sure, and I know that is accurate. However, if it's specific and it's like the way that I saw House maneuver Shaw with that, it actually gave me more freedom and leeway to feed Brian even more going into his training. And so the next thing you know, you've got 1 + 2 was equal 4 because it was slingshotting basically the impact straight into that training. And all of a sudden, Brian's work capacity is up, you know, and when his work capacity goes up, well, what happens with that? Then your insulin sensitivity also improves because, again, he's able to hit more reps. He's able to do more things in that end. So, like, it benefited everything. So that was an astonishing thing to be part of and witness as well. So definitely recommend people check that out.
Could that just be you're increasing the circulation of the nutrients before the training?
I think it's a combination of both because Brian's ability to recover skyrocketed. Like, so not only did his performance going into his training events shoot up immediately, because again, I was able to feed him more. So that's one thing, but I didn't necessarily feed Brian more on the recovery aspect because that was already high anyway with the way that I approached him and how it worked into his lifestyle. So like his meal that would follow training would always be large, especially very protein rich. And the same thing with his last meal of the day. So his recovery was always one particular good set rate. But once he started doing that specific conditioning aspects with House, then, I mean, Brian's recovery ability almost was like, he could basically have repeated the same exercise training the next day, and he probably would have had 95% similar outcomes as the day before. It was wild to watch with how it impacted him on that, you know. And then again, me being able to benefit off it by seeing how it was impacting that insulin sensitivity and that response. But it was really interesting. So if you check that book out, you'll see he's got a very specific pattern and way he likes to do things. And I have seen with my own eyes how effective that was. But another aspect of how at the end of the day, things come down to, regarding progress, how did it impact your insulin response? So,
yeah. Any final thoughts?
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah,
and I really appreciate being out here. And again, if if anybody leaves any of the interviews that I've done with anything and is able to just apply it and get benefit, that's kind of everything to me. But please especially understand that you don't have to have certain finances or certain perfect equipment or perfect training environment or anything in order to pursue whatever your dreams are or your goals are. Because I've worked with individuals and I've seen those who are at the most advantaged and I've seen those who are at the most disadvantaged. And I have seen everyone, if they just put in the fucking work, I have seen everyone be successful. You know, there is no shortcut. There's no magic formula. There's no specific perfect everything. The specific perfect anything is what you yourself find that you can do in your own lifestyle every single day consistently. Nobody has ever failed to make progress by consistently doing the thing that they are working on. It's just not possible. You know, if you're walking down a road 1 foot in front of the other, unless you stop walking, you're still moving forward.
Yeah.
I just don't want people to feel defeated and think they just can't even start down that road. That's not the case. A lot of that is marketing out there. Don't get caught up in that.
All right. Great way to end. I want to thank you for coming out. This has been great.
Thanks, Dave.
We're done.